Welcome back to Calm Drama Stories, where quiet individuals tell you exactly how they took their lives back. Without shouting, without chaos, just the steady, undeniable truth told slowly. If stories about family dynamics, setting firm boundaries, and long overdue self-respect resonate with you, please drop a comment below and hit that subscribe button. In today's feature story, a woman agrees to stay behind and house-sit over a holiday weekend under the impression that her family is planning a heartwarming surprise for her. Instead, she wakes up to an empty driveway, an abandoned house, and a cold note left on the counter listing her daily chores. But when she discovers the hidden, deceitful reason her family left her behind, and the financial scheme they were attempting to execute without her knowledge, she decides it is finally time to balance a ledger 6 years in the making. Here is her story. My name is Clara Vance, and I am 34 years old. On the Saturday morning of Memorial Day weekend, I woke up in my mother's house to a silence so deep and heavy that the only sound in the entire structure was the low, electric hum of the kitchen refrigerator. My family had packed up their belongings and left the state entirely, leaving me behind without a single word. For 2 full weeks prior to that morning, every single member of my family had repeated the exact same phrase to me. "Clara, don't make any plans." They had whispered in low tones near the kitchen island, hushing their voices the second I walked into the room. "Just wait and see," my mother would say with a warm, knowing smile. So, being the dutiful daughter, I waited. I even slept in my childhood bedroom on Friday night, because my mother had explicitly asked me to stay over. Yet, when I stepped down the stairs on Saturday morning, I was greeted by an empty driveway, 2 missing vehicles, and a single sheet of notebook paper left resting on the kitchen counter right beside the salt shaker. The note was written in my mother's round, cheerful handwriting. It read, "Ruth's medication schedule. Blue pill with breakfast, white pill at night. Full list is on the fridge. Trash goes out on Tuesday morning. Please water my hydrangeas, they wilt quickly in this heat. Back on Monday evening. Thanks, sweetie. No apology. No detail de explanation. No mention of where they were going or why I wasn't coming along. Not even my actual name, just sweetie. The polite, generic term you use for a stranger or a pet." I stood alone in my pajamas in that quiet kitchen, holding the piece of paper, and felt the room undergo a slow, cold tilt. I finally understood the architecture of the situation. Don't make any plans. They hadn't told me that because a grand surprise was being organized for me. I was the plan. I was the designated house sitter, the caretaker, the plant waterer, and the pill counter. The domestic staff doesn't get invited on the family vacation. The staff gets left with a checklist. I dialed my mother's cell phone once. It went straight to voicemail, playing her cheerful automated greeting. I set the phone down gently on the counter, brewed a single mug of coffee in the spotless kitchen, and stood by the window drinking it while my family traveled north on the highway. By noon, the reality of where they had gone was revealed to me through a glowing glass screen. It came via my sister Amber's social media story. I wasn't actively looking for it, but the algorithm placed it right at the top of my feed. First slide. A wide shot of a sunlit wooden dock extending over pristine, crystal blue water. My younger brother, Ethan, captured midair in an energetic cannonball jump. Second slide. My mother wearing her wide-brimmed white sun hat, raising a plastic tumbler toward the camera, laughing with genuine, uninhibited joy. Third slide. Amber's husband, Mark, tending to an outdoor grill while their 12-year-old daughter, Lily, balanced on a paddleboard. I recognized that dock instantly. It was Lake Pinecrest, our family's retreat home 2 hours north, built by my late father. The one place I had not been invited to. And draped across the bottom of the final photo, written in a stylish cursive font, was Amber's caption. "Best weekend trip ever when she's not around. LOL." Over 200 people had already viewed and liked the post. My aunt had even commented with a series of heart emojis. I stood in that empty kitchen and read those words 4 times in silence. When she's not around. LOL. I waited for the wave of explosive anger to surge up inside me, but it never came. Instead, what replaced it was something far more profound. A quiet, absolute stillness, cold and wide, like a lake freezing over in a single night. I didn't leave a comment. I didn't send a furious text message. I didn't post a cryptic status. I simply placed my phone face down on the counter, washed my coffee mug, dried it thoroughly, and placed it back in the cupboard. Then, I picked up my mother's watering can, walked out to the front porch toward her hydrangeas, and paused mid-air. I looked down at those plants, set the full watering can down on the railing, and walked away. Every system has an off switch, and mine had just been flipped. What my family failed to realize when they left the state was that they had left me entirely alone with access to every account, every administrative detail, and every record I had managed for them over the last 6 years. To understand how I ended up in that empty kitchen, you need to know who was left standing there. I own and operate a small, independent accounting firm on Oak Street in Oak Ridge, Illinois. I employ 3 part-time staff members, manage 42 regular clients, and work alongside a commercial coffee brewing machine older than my professional career. I built my business from the ground up after completing my degree, earning my clientele one grueling tax season at a time. I live alone in a quiet, organized apartment 10 minutes away from the neighborhood where I grew up. I prefer writing my daily notes in pencil, because ink is reserved strictly for items that are finalized and official. People trust me with their finances because I am methodical, accurate, and calm under pressure. 6 years ago, my father passed away suddenly from a massive cardiac event in the parking lot of a local building supply store at 57 years old. He had been the structural anchor of our household. When an anchor gives way, someone has to step in to keep the ship stabilized, and that responsibility fell entirely onto my shoulders. I quietly became the person who kept the machinery of our family operational. My 83-year-old grandmother Ruth's intricate medical schedule was saved and organized in my phone. My mother's HVAC technician, plumber, and electrician had my direct line on file rather than hers. Every tax return for my mother, my sister, my brother, and my brother-in-law crossed my desk every spring, prepared entirely free of charge. And resting on a high shelf in my private office, nestled safely between confidential client files, was a thick green 3-ring binder that no member of my family had ever seen. I had compiled data into that binder year after year, quietly and meticulously. 6 years of my life, my labor, and my personal finances resided within its pages. Up until that September morning, it sat on the shelf, waiting patiently for someone in my family to ask the right question. From an outside perspective, my family appeared perfectly picturesque. My mother, Evelyn, 61, could host an extraordinary holiday dinner on a moment's notice, orchestrating every gathering like a theatrical director. My sister, Amber, 37, worked part-time at a local credit union, and was married to Mark, a warehouse supervisor. Their daughter, Lily, 12, was curious, kind, and uniquely observant. My younger brother, Ethan, 29, sold commercial gym equipment and had spent the last 4 years claiming he was one investor away from launching his own fitness studio franchise. Every Sunday afternoon, we gathered for dinner at my mother's home. And every Sunday without fail, an administrative need would arise. A disputed utility bill, an insurance claim, a complex form. The room would inevitably utter the exact same phrase in a light-hearted, casual tone. Clara will handle it. Nobody ever paused to ask if Clara wanted to handle it. You don't ask an appliance if it minds running. I resolved administrative errors, filed paperwork, and provided free financial oversight without complaint. The very first time I set a boundary was the previous autumn. Ethan had asked me to co-sign a substantial loan for a brand new luxury pickup truck he could not afford. Instead of signing, I offered to help him review his personal finances and budget for a reliable used vehicle. He reacted as though I had personally insulted him. The resulting emotional chill at Sunday dinners lasted 3 full weeks. It was my mother's signature tactic, a passive environment where no one expressed direct anger, but tension was felt in every interaction. I assumed that cold spell had dissolved by the summertime. I was wrong about what it had actually evolved into. After leaving my mother's empty house on Saturday morning, I didn't engage in furious phone calls or frantic text messages. Anger is a costly emotion. It consumes energy without yielding results. Instead, I packed my grandmother Ruth's medication, drove to her small brick home on Elm Street, and knocked on her front door. Because behind the scenes, another person had been quietly excluded from the weekend trip. an 83-year-old woman with a minor mobility issue and a sharp, perceptive mind. They had left her behind as well, deeming her too much effort to transport. Grandmother Ruth opened her door, took one look at my expression and said calmly, "Well, you might as well come inside and make us some breakfast." So, the two people omitted from the guest list sat at her kitchen table, eating breakfast off her classic china plates, avoiding the topic of the lake house for a full hour. Ruth had served as an elementary school teacher for over 30 years. She possessed an innate ability to recognize when something was amiss long before it was openly acknowledged. As she poured more coffee, she revealed the sparse details she had been given. My mother had dropped by her house on Thursday afternoon, leaving behind frozen meals and explaining that the weekend trip was an adults-only getaway, with steep stairs that Ruth would dislike. Ruth stirred her coffee and made an observation I will never forget. "They took the keys to the boat," she said softly. "It's funny how people rarely ask who keeps the lights running until the room goes dark." Then she added something unexpected. "Your father made one very sensible decision regarding that property before he passed away. Ask me about it when you're truly ready." "I'm ready right now," I replied. Ruth shook her head. "No, Clara. You are angry right now. Being ready is different. Ready comes after you realize what they are actually planning up there. Your mother came by my house on Thursday with home-cooked meals, but she also had her formal estate folder resting on the passenger seat. Nobody packs legal paperwork for a casual weekend at the lake." I didn't fully grasp her meaning until 2 hours later, when I picked up my grandmother's digital tablet. 3 years ago, when Ruth's physician transitioned to virtual consultations, the family decided, once again, that Clara will handle it. I had configured a tablet for her using an old digital account belonging to my sister Amber, as Amber had unused cloud storage and didn't want to incur additional fees. Amber had never bothered to log out of the account on that device. While clearing old notifications from the tablet screen to prepare for Ruth's upcoming appointment, a calendar alert popped up at the top of the interface. Reminder: meeting with Realtor Gary Vance, Pinecrest Lake Cottage, Monday at 11 a.m. I froze. Gary Vance was a prominent regional real estate broker, whose face appeared on prominent billboards along the state highway. My analytical mind immediately calculated the variables. A top-tier commercial real estate agent scheduled to meet my entire family at our father's lake property on a holiday Monday at 11 a.m. While the only family member who reads every contract was deliberately left 2 hours away under the guise of watering plants. My family hadn't taken a simple weekend vacation. They had organized an unannounced business meeting, and they specifically required me not to be in the room. With quiet precision, I opened the synced messaging application on the device. At the very top of the message list sat a group chat titled Pinecrest Retreat Evergreen Tree, created in the 3rd week of May, the exact week I was completing their annual tax filings. I scrolled through 3 months of detailed planning, logistics regarding gear, food expenses, and transport. My mother reminding Amber to schedule the trip specifically during the week I handle quarterly corporate reporting, so I wouldn't insist on joining. A message from mid-June, where my 12-year-old niece Lily had asked, "Is Aunt Clara coming? She loves the lake house." My mother's direct reply, time-stamped at 9:41 a.m. "Not this time, sweetie. She'll insist on doing all the math out loud." She'll insist on doing all the math out loud. That was my infraction, stated plainly in writing by my own mother. Not that I was unkind, unhelpful, or distant, but that I would analyze the numbers openly in front of everyone. As I continued scrolling, I uncovered an attached file pinned to the conversation thread. An edited version of the family budget template I had personally created for my mother 2 years ago to help her manage her basic expenses. They had used my custom template to plan the trip, complete with split costs for gas, food, and a specific line item: lunch with Realtor. The remaining chat logs revealed the entire objective. Sunday night. Family meeting to ensure everyone was aligned before the broker arrived. Monday at 11 a.m. Gary Vance walks the property to finalize a listing agreement before the autumn real estate market slowed down. Ethan's message from July. The franchise deposit deadline is the Friday after Labor Day. $60,000 secures my territory. My mother's message from August. The lake house only incurs ongoing maintenance costs. Your father would want the property's value put to work for the family's future. My mother's final instruction, posted 10 days prior. Do not tell Clara until the agreement is finalized. You know how she gets. I sat back in my grandmother's armchair with the tablet in my lap, observing the complete picture. They were not merely taking a holiday without me. They were preparing to sell my late father's lake property to fund my brother's risky business venture, and they had deliberately assigned me house-sitting duties to keep me occupied. I drove back to my apartment as the evening sun dipped below the horizon. I didn't turn on the television or pour a drink. I walked directly into my home office, retrieved the thick green 3-ring binder from the shelf, and set it down on my kitchen table. Then, for the first time in 6 years, I reviewed every document from start to finish as an objective auditor would. Property taxes. Lake Pinecrest $3,900 annually x 6 years equals $23,400. Paid entirely from my account. Official receipts filed. Property insurance. $1,650 annually x 6 years equals $9,900. Automatic monthly transfer from my business account. Septic tank system replacement. For years ago $7,200. Paid directly to the contractor after an emergency failure. Roof repairs. After severe winter storm $4,800. Dockstruktural restauration. $2,300. HVAC system replacement, plumbing winterization and routine maintenance. $13,800. At the bottom of the final ledger page, written in my clear pencil handwriting, was the grand total I had never once brought up at Sunday dinner. Grand total equals $61,400. The lake house only incurs ongoing maintenance costs. My mother had written in the group chat. She was right about it incurring costs. It simply had never cost her a single cent. I placed my palm flat over those documents, remembering her tone on the phone over the past 2 weeks. I observed 6 years of quiet, unacknowledged financial contributions, and I finalized my plan. However, a proper administrative execution requires verified documentation, and I was missing one crucial piece. On Sunday morning, I returned to my grandmother Ruth's home. I sat at her table and said, "I'm ready now. Tell me about the decision my father made." Ruth nodded slowly and explained. 8 years ago, 2 years prior to his passing, my father suffered a health scare that landed him in the hospital for a week. The experience prompted him to organize his long-term affairs. When he recovered, he refinanced the lake house to repair its foundation. And on an afternoon that autumn, he drove to the county land records office and updated the property deed. He established a joint tenancy with right of survivorship, naming himself and me as co-owners of record. Ruth had accompanied him to witness the signing. He told me that the property should belong to the person who consistently shows up and takes care of things. Ruth recalled quietly. I had signed those title documents myself at 26 years old, treating it as standard estate paperwork, without fully realizing its legal significance at the time. My father had intended to announce the updated deed to the rest of the family when the timing felt right, but his sudden passing 2 years later meant the conversation never occurred. I had quietly filed my copy of the deed away alongside my grief, never bringing it up while my mother mourned. So as of that Sunday morning, the legal reality was simple. My family was sitting 2 hours north, preparing to list a property that my mother did not so own, and could not legally sell without my explicit, notarized signature. Before I departed, Ruth offered one additional piece of family history. She told me about my mother's early adulthood. When my mother was 23, her own mother's health declined. While her 2 sisters moved out of state, my mother spent 7 full years managing household duties, medical care, and daily chores without assistance or compensation. When my mother once delicately brought up the idea of financial relief, her mother dismissed the notion, asserting that taking care of family was simply a daughter's mandatory duty. Your mother endured that exact dynamic, Ruth said, looking at me intently. And rather than dismantling it, she replicated it with you. But understanding where a cycle begins doesn't mean you are obligated to continue participating in it. On Sunday evening at 9 p.m., I sat at my kitchen table with my laptop. According to the group chat timeline, My family was currently putting the children to bed and gathering on the enclosed porch for their private strategy meeting. Every one of their phones contained my contact number. Yet not one person had reached out. At 9:12 p.m., I drafted a formal email to the corporate address of Gary Vance Real Estate. The message contained exactly 3 concise lines. Subject: Official title notice. 14 Pinecrest Shore Drive. I am a joint owner of record for the property located at 14 Pinecrest Shore Drive. Parcel tax ID attached. The property is strictly not for sale, and no listing agreement or representation contract will be authorized or signed by me. I strongly advise your office to perform a title verification through the county registry prior to your scheduled 11 a.m. consultation tomorrow. Sincerely, Clara Vance Accounting Services. I attached a scanned PDF copy of the registered deed, copied my own business email, and hit send. On Monday morning, Labor Day, I turned my phone on silent and took my grandmother to the local farmer's market. We bought fresh produce, enjoyed coffee outdoors, and spent the morning in total tranquility. Meanwhile, 2 hours north, the situation unfolded precisely as expected. At 11:04 a.m., resting on the bench beside me, my phone screen illuminated. 11:04 a.m., missed call from mother. 11:06 a.m., second missed call from mother. 11:10 a.m., missed call from Ethan. 11:11 a.m., second missed call from Ethan. 11:12 a.m., third missed call from Ethan. 11:20 a.m., missed call from Amber. 11:40 a.m., missed call from Mark, a man who had never personally called my phone number in his life. By mid-afternoon, my device recorded dozens of notifications. I opened only the messages sent by my 12-year-old niece Lily, who was texting from her mother's phone. Aunt Clara, why is everyone arguing? The real estate agent guy left after 10 minutes. He didn't even look at the house. Grandma deleted her internet post. By midnight, my phone registered 63 missed calls and numerous text threads across 5 different numbers. Among all those frantic attempts at contact, there was a single voicemail left by my mother at 11:58 p.m. Her voice was low and strained. Please come home, Clara. We didn't know. We didn't know. Sitting in my quiet home, I replied softly to the dark room. You knew enough to keep it a secret. On Tuesday afternoon, my brother Ethan stormed into my accounting office on Oak Street. Sunburned and visibly furious, he bypassed my receptionist, stepped into my private office, and slammed his hand onto my desk. You knew, he shouted. You sat here comfortably and let us drive straight into a wall. You ruined my franchise opportunity. I finished typing the entry on my screen, saved the ledger, and folded my hands neatly. You spent 4 months planning a secret meeting, I stated calmly. I sent a single factual email. He began ranting about how I had embarrassed him in front of business partners, and how I always thought I was superior to the rest of the family. Then he uttered the core argument. Family resources belong to the whole family, Clara. If family resources belong to the whole family, I replied, then why is it that no one else in this family has contributed a single dollar toward maintaining those resources for 6 years? Unable to formulate a logical response, Ethan kicked my metal wastebasket into the wall, scattering paper across the floor, before turning around and slamming the door behind him. That evening at 7 p.m., my sister Amber arrived at my apartment. She brought a prepared dinner dish as a gesture of peace and appeared genuinely distraught. When she stepped inside, she immediately attempted to explain the offensive caption from her social media post. It was a terrible joke, she stammered. I was upset because Mom told us back in June that you had explicitly rejected the invitation to come. I looked at her attentively. What exactly did Mom tell you? Amber explained. Mom told the entire family that she invited you first, but you said Labor Day was your busiest quarter, and that we should go without you. She specifically told us not to bring up the trip around you, so you wouldn't feel guilty about working. The complete manipulation was clear. To me, my mother had said, don't make plans. Stay in town. Just wait. To my siblings, my mother had said, Clara turned down the trip. Do not bring it up to her. She had fabricated 2 separate narratives to keep us from communicating directly, ensuring she could manage her scheme without interference. On Wednesday morning, My mother sent repeated messages requesting my presence at her house for a family reconciliation dinner. I declined the invitation. Instead, I sent a single group text to the primary family message thread. Wednesday at 7 p.m. Mother's living room. I will bring the official documentation. That afternoon, I utilized my office commercial copier to produce 4 neatly collated, bound duplicate sets of the green binder, containing 6 years of receipts, tax forms, insurance statements, and bank transfers. At 7 p.m. sharp, I arrived at my mother's house accompanied by grandmother Ruth. The living room was arranged formally. My mother sat on the edge of the sofa in her best sweater. Ethan stood near the window with his arms tightly crossed. Amber and Mark sat side by side on the love seat. Ruth took her seat in the main armchair. My mother began in her traditional, soothing tone. Clara, before we start, I want you to understand how much we all love you. I raised one hand calmly, stopping her sentence mid-air. I walked to the center of the room and placed the thick green binder squarely onto the coffee table. My name is registered on the property deed, I stated clearly, but that is only the beginning of what you need to review. I opened the binder and began presenting the itemized accounting records year by year. Property taxes, $3,900 annually for 6 consecutive years. Paid in full by my business account. Here are the official county receipts. Property insurance, $1,650 annually. Paid automatically via my account. Emergency septic replacement, $7,200. Here is the paid contractor invoice bearing my signature. Roof repairs, dock foundation, heating system, winterization and repairs. Page after page. The room was completely silent. No one moved. I flipped to the final summary page and read the grand total out loud into the living room. $61,400. I placed a collated copy of the financial record directly in front of my mother, Ethan, Amber, and Mark. Mom previously stated that I insist on doing the math out loud. I said, looking directly at her. So tonight we are doing the math out loud together. My mother looked down at the documents in her lap. The polished, composed posture she had maintained for years suddenly fractured. I couldn't afford it, she whispered, her voice trembling. After your father passed away, the pension was significantly less than expected. I took out personal loans. I tried to reorganize the budget every month, but the expenses were overwhelming. Your father always handled the accounts, and when he was gone, everyone assumed I was managing fine. I was too proud to admit I was struggling. She looked up at me with tears in her eyes. The bills began arriving with your name already listed on the joint accounts. You paid them quietly. You never complained, and you never demanded reimbursement. You made it so easy for me to rely on you. She paused, folding her hands tightly. Nobody ever offered to assist me when I cared for my mother for 7 years either. I assumed that is simply what daughters are supposed to do. Ruth sat quietly in the armchair, listening to her daughter repeat the exact pattern she had predicted. I looked at my mother and said softly, "That is a tragic history, Mom. But enduring unfairness in the past does not justify inflicting it on someone else today." Amber immediately interjected, attempting to find a quick transactional resolution. "Okay, here is a practical compromise. We list the property for sale. The market value is high right now, roughly $320,000. The first $61,400 from the sale proceeds goes directly to Clara to fully reimburse her. That way, Clara is made completely whole, and the remaining profit is split among the family. That is completely fair." Ethan stepped forward eagerly. "And $60,000 from the remaining proceeds covers my franchise deposit by Friday. I can pay the family back within 3 years." My mother stood up, walked over to me, and took my hands in hers. She made her final, most compelling appeal, offering me emotional validation in exchange for my compliance. "Sign the agreement, Clara," she pleaded gently. "Just this once, and everything will change. You can formally manage all family finances and decisions moving forward. Everything will be transparent. You will be the official head of this family." It was the exact validation I had spent years yearning for. Full recognition, respect, and authority. All I had to do was sign the document and surrender the property. I looked down at her hands, withdrew mine gently, and stood up straight. The lake house is not for sale, I stated in a calm, unyielding voice. Not this fall, not to fund a business deposit, and not to maintain an illusion. My father placed my name on that title, and it will remain there. The property remains open for family use. Lily will continue learning to swim off that dock every summer. That will not change. I gathered my central binder from the table. What changes tonight is this, I continued. My unacknowledged financial coverages end effective immediately. Moving forward, all property taxes, insurance, and maintenance for the lake house will be divided equally among all adult family members via a formal, written agreement. I will draft the cost-sharing contract for free, but it is the absolute last unpaid service I will ever perform for this family. I turned directly to Ethan. The answer regarding the $60,000 venture funding is no. A business venture that requires liquidating family assets without consensus is not an investment. It is an indulgence. When you develop a viable, independent business plan, I will happily review your financials at my professional office during regular business hours. Finally, I looked at my mother. I do not want to manage this family, Mom. I simply wanted to be an equal member of it. It cost me $61,400 to learn the difference. I am your daughter. I was never your domestic staff. Ethan slammed his fist against the doorframe. Then the franchise opportunity is gone, he shouted. You are the sole reason this family is fractured. He grabbed his coat and exited the house, slamming the door so hard the framed photos rattled on the wall. My mother sat down on the sofa in complete silence. Amber and Mark stood up quietly, gathered their belongings, and prepared to leave. As I walked toward the front entrance, little steps sounded on the staircase. Lily ran down, bypassed her mother, and wrapped her arms around my waist in a tight hug. She looked up at me and whispered, Great-Grandma Ruth told me you were going to stand up for yourself tonight. She told me to watch carefully. I hugged my niece tightly, bid a polite goodnight to the room, and walked out into the cool evening air. Life did not instantly transform into a fairy tale of perfect harmony the following morning. Real life rarely operates that way. My brother Ethan entered a period of non-communication. He took on additional shifts at his current job and blamed me for his missed franchise opportunity. Amber maintained a distant, polite relationship, occasionally sending updates regarding my niece. My mother spent several weeks processing the encounter. Then, on a Tuesday afternoon in late October, the bell above my accounting office door chimed. My mother walked inside carrying a folder of unopened household statements. She walked up to my desk and said quietly, Teach me how to manage the binder. So I did. We sat together at my desk, reviewing basic budgeting, utility tracking, and debt management. She eventually took a part-time position at a local boutique to generate her own independent income. In December, she placed a check for $200 on my counter. The first installment of a repayment plan she instituted entirely on her own initiative. Relative to $61,400, it was a modest amount, but the monetary value was never the true point of the gesture. My niece Lily began visiting my office every Friday afternoon after school to learn fundamental bookkeeping and personal finance. 1 year later, on Labor Day weekend, I woke up early at the Lake Pinecrest cottage. I carried a warm mug of coffee out to the wooden dock my father had built. The morning air was crisp, and the surface of the lake reflected the clear blue sky. By 8 a.m., Grandmother Ruth was sitting comfortably on the screened porch. By mid-morning, Lily was practicing dive techniques off the end of the dock while Amber recorded videos from the shore. My mother arrived at noon with lunch, taking a seat on the porch as an invited guest. Inside the cottage kitchen, framed neatly in a binder, rests a formal co-ownership agreement signed by all parties. Expenses are tracked transparently, shared equally, and discussed openly. There are no secret group chats, no passive notes left on counters, and no hushed whispers in the hallway. If there is one fundamental truth to take away from my story, it is this. Being needed is not the same thing as being genuinely loved. The day you finally learn the difference is the day you stop acting as passive furniture in other people's lives and start authoring your own narrative. Thank you for listening to this story on Com Drama Stories. If this narrative resonated with you or reminded you of a boundary you needed to set in your own life, Please leave a comment below. Don't forget to like this video, share it with someone who needs to hear it today, and subscribe for more stories. I will see you in the next episode.